I have just accepted Her Majesty the Queen's kind invitation to form a new government. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's fantastic to be back.
In this new era, we're taking a new approach.
It will be uncensorable and uncancelable.
We can't give in to those who say we can't do better.
That is a disgrace. We can make the West great again.
The status quo is not an option.
Welcome to the Liz Truss Show. British politics is in meltdown again, as Peter Mandelson has been disgraced again, this time over his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Seeing the scenes at Downing Street at the moment, I'm reminded of what happened in 2022. But I feel no sympathy at all for Keir Starmer. He's brought this on himself. He's sold out our country. He appointed Peter Mandelson as US ambassador. And as ambassador, Mandelson pushed hard to get American approval for the Chagos Islands surrender deal. This deal threatens to hand over a strategic military base in the Indian Ocean to China. This week, I talked to Nile Gardiner of the Heritage Foundation about what needs to be done to stop this deal, including taking on both the American and British deep states, and the American reaction to Peter Mandelson and Epstein. It's fantastic to be joined by Nile Gardiner of the Heritage Foundation to talk about what is happening in the transatlantic relationship, and in particular, the change that we've seen on US policy with respect to the Chagos Islands. What's changed, Niall, in the last week in the US position?
Well, firstly, thanks very much for having me on the show, Liz. And it's certainly been a roller coaster ride here in Washington on the Chagos front. Actually, after all, just 2 weeks ago, President Trump intervened to attack the Chagos deal, calling it an act of great stupidity, which it is. And just yesterday, the president released a new statement, which actually went in a rather different direction. He didn't give a wholehearted endorsement of the Chagos deal, but he said that he understands this is the best deal that the British could come up with. And he did warn at the same time that if there was any threat to the future of Diego Garcia, that he would instruct the United States to take whatever military action is necessary. So quite a mixed message from the president. We're still, I think, fully deciphering the exact meaning of what the president has said here. After all, it was a surprise statement actually on Truth Social just yesterday. I spoke to a number of administration officials who had no awareness of it. So I do think this statement, can be read in many different ways, and it's not an emphatic endorsement of the Chagos deal, but it's a recognition of the fact the United States is dealing with a Labour government that has put forward one, in my view, horrific recommendation, which is the Chagos surrender deal, and the United States is simply acknowledging it as a reality. Basically, that's where the president is. But I think it's a very live issue, Liz, and my view is that there's still time for the president to actually come out with a new statement in the next couple of weeks, just slamming the deal altogether and sending it to the bottom of the Indian Ocean. So this could happen as well. So all options are on the table right now, Liz. So this is a very volatile issue in Washington. Every single US official that I've spoken to in the last few weeks hates the deal. I've not found a single US official who supports the Chagos deal.
Because it's basically handing over the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, who are being funded by China. And it's at the behest of an international court, the International Court of Justice, which is controlled by China. And the problem is the British deep state are completely beholden to international law. Britain is the only permanent country on the Security Council to compulsorily follow the judgments of the ICJ. And it's baked into the ministerial code. It's baked into operations. And this all happened, of course, under the leadership of Tony Blair. And the big mistake of the Conservative government was not to reverse this love of international law, this love of human rights law, this capitulation that the Labour government had put in place. And what I think has been going on in the last few weeks is there's been a rearguard action from the British deep state to try and stop the US kiboshing the deal.
Yes, correct. That's 100% right, Liz, and I've seen this firsthand. And you've got the British deep state reaching out to the deep state within the United States. And I do think that there's a very small group of individuals within the US administration who actually are friendly with Keir Starmer's regime and who somehow support the Chagos deal. It's a small minority. I have to say, Liz, because every official I've spoken to, and I've spoken to many officials in the last few weeks, think the deal is a knife in the back for the United States and a huge strategic victory for communist China. And this is a classic example of the British government working through the Washington deep state, feeding in, frankly, lies and disinformation actually about the Chagos deal. This is a very dangerous deal for the United States. There are no security guarantees for Diego Garcia here. And the United States has been sold a complete pack of lies actually by Downing Street and Keir Starmer's government. And unfortunately, there are a small number of officials in Washington who are collaborating with Keir Starmer's socialist government on this. And as I mentioned earlier, Liz, I do think we can still stop this deal, and the United States can still intervene directly against it. There is still time to do this, and I do think the president's instincts on it, regardless of what was said in the statement yesterday, which of course is clearly written by some bureaucrat, for the president. The president's instincts on this, I think, are fundamentally against the deal, actually. As he expressed in his original Truth Social, he completely, as he said in his Truth Social post 2 weeks ago, he completely opposed the Chagos deal. And so, in my view, I don't think that the president seriously believes that this is in any way a good deal for the United States. And I don't think the statement that was put out on Truth Social, frankly, represents the president's own views on this, actually. I mean, he clearly views it as terrible.
Well, what we have here is we have this transatlantic Securicat establishment, and they've been there for many years. I saw them directly when I had to deal with the Biden administration, people like Jake Sullivan. But there were lots of people, not just in the administration, but also in organizations in DC. They'd go to the Munich Security Conference. They were a cabal of people who worked very closely with the EU, very closely with the instincts of the British Foreign Office, which is all about international law, the rules-based international order, capitulating to these bodies like the United Nations, like the World Trade Organization. And what Donald Trump has done is he has essentially taken all of that on. That's what he's done with his foreign policy so far. He said, this isn't working. The West has been losing. China's been winning. Iran's been winning. I am going to take a very different stance. But these people, including in the American bureaucracy, are still trying to fight back. And that's what Chagos is, a microcosm of this bigger debate. And I believe Trump is right. Organizations like the UN don't work. They've been captured. He's right to set up the Board of Peace. he's been right to challenge NATO on not spending enough, European countries in NATO. So where in the American administration deep state is this working with the Keir Starmer regime happening? Is it in the Defense Department, the State Department? Who are these people now?
It's a good question. And actually, I do know a lot about this, Liz, about what kinds of forces are working to advance what is the most, in my view, treacherous deal ever put forward by a British Prime Minister. I do have a good idea. I'm not in a position, unfortunately, to actually comment about what I do know on this. But what I can say is that, as you correctly pointed out, there is a real deep state blob that still exists in Washington. President Trump has taken a flamethrower, of course, to the international supranationalist pro-EU blob. And he's done more than any US president, I think, to fight against this on the world stage. But at the same time, here in Washington, there still remain, unfortunately, I have to say, a significant and somewhat powerful element that is pro-EU, that is very sympathetic towards international courts, that is closely aligned with socialists like Keir Starmer. These are individuals who hate, of course, what Nigel Farage represents in Britain. They're very anti-Brexit. They've been in power in Washington behind the scenes for many, many decades, actually. And they are most powerful, of course, under Democrat administrations. But even under Republican administrations, they actively work actually to undermine the interests of the United States. It's a very real part of Washington. Liz, you've seen this yourself as former foreign secretary, as former prime minister. You've seen this in action on both sides of the Atlantic. It's very real. It's not some kind of myth out there. I mean, it's very, very real and apparent to anyone who has worked, as I have for many decades here in Washington. I've seen it firsthand, and President Trump has fought against it, but it's still there, in my view, undermining actually the very actions of the president. And I do think that Chagos is the living embodiment of this deep state problem that exists here in Washington at this time, and of course it exists on a massive scale in London and Brussels and across Europe. It's these sort of Euro.
We have the entire state is taken over by this.
Yes, exactly.
You have we have the entire government, legal department, the entire foreign office, the entire national security apparatus. Is all of this mindset in Britain, and it all needs to be taken on. What could be done to take these people on, Niall, in Washington, D.C.?
That's a very key question. I think there has to be, a root and branch, a complete root and branch review of all personnel, frankly, within the U.S. administration, and those who are not aligned with the president's agenda shouldn't be there. It's as simple as that. But the reality is there are large numbers of people who are not aligned with the president's agenda who are there. They're more aligned actually with the agenda of Keir Starmer and Ursula von der Leyen and the Euro federalists and so on. But there has to be a complete review, I think. And what's happened in Chagos is that you've got a small number of bureaucrats who have colluded really with a foreign government. In this case, it's the British government. Normally, the British government you would think would do the right thing, but actually, a lot of the time they do not. And especially when you have a Labour government like Keir Starmer, who, in my view, and I said this on last night an interview on GB News, I do view Keir Starmer as a complete and utter traitor to Great Britain, and the Chagos deal is the living embodiment of that treachery. And even worse, of course, they're selling this deal to the United States, which is inevitably going to mean the end of Diego Garcia within a few years. Communist China will take that. Mauritius is a puppet regime of Communist China. And so you've got this treacherous regime in London headed by Keir Starmer, that is actively working to undermine the national security of the United States through the Chagos deal. I mean, it's that bad. And it sounds like something out of a fictional novel, but it's the reality here, really. We've got a British government.
They're not really hiding it. I mean, Keir Starmer's just approved this mega Chinese spy embassy
exactly.
in the middle of London, right next to all the key cables from the city.
Yeah.
He has been on a trip to China with a begging bowl, talking about closer cooperation as if China could be trusted and are not the greatest strategic threat to the world order. And we've also had the spectacle of Peter Mandelson, who is now being investigated by the police for violating the Official Secrets Act, which is a very serious offence here in the United Kingdom. But he was the ambassador that was pushing this deal.
Yeah.
He's found to have been close to Jeffrey Epstein. He's found to have been leaking government secrets. He is also close to China. To what extent do you think this is not just pure treachery, but it's active involvement and engagement with China and infiltration by China of our governments?
It's a very good point. And in my view, I think that Keir Starmer is very subservient to Beijing. And we saw that with his recent kowtow trip, meeting with Xi Jinping, and which was a huge embarrassment for Britain, really. And Keir Starmer kowtows to both Beijing and to Brussels. I mean, they seem to be his masters, frankly, and it's groveling and it's appalling to see this. And you mentioned, of course, Peter Mandelson, someone with a long history of engagement with communist China, and he was placed in Washington as the ambassador. And the British ambassador to Washington, of course, is probably the third most important figure for the UK on the world stage after the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary. And Mandelson was placed in a crucially important position. I believe that Mandelson was placed there in order to sell the Chagos deal to Washington. And that was his main focus, actually, for many months. And he ran a huge PR operation in Washington to try and convince the Trump administration to sign on to the deal. And Mandelson is a classic sort of snake oil salesman. And you need a political snake to sell snake oil, and that's what Mandelson specializes in. And he is someone, of course, who has long-standing engagement with communist China. And, of course, this is a matter, no doubt, for a future parliamentary inquiry to uncover exactly what was going on. But in my view, Mandelson was a completely, treacherous, figure with a long, track record of political scandal and disgrace. And Keir Starmer put him in this key position in Washington. Why? I think it was really to get the Chagos deal across the line at the end of the day. Mandelson was a very effective operator. And most Americans, of course, were not aware of his past. And so he was generally treated very well here in Washington, and few really had a clear understanding of who he was and what his background was. And he put on this huge charm offensive. I do think Mandelson thought he was, a sort of modern day emperor here in Washington. He acted as though he was even bigger than the British Prime Minister as the ambassador, and I saw that firsthand. Mandelson thought that he was, he had more power and status than the British Prime Minister, and that was very very evident. And now we've seen the downfall of Mandelson and imminently, of course, Keir Starmer as well. But Mandelson was put in place by Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer made this conscious decision. Keir Starmer knew exactly what Mandelson was all about and placed him in this position. And there needs to be a full, comprehensive inquiry, ultimately, in exactly what happened here. This is one of the biggest scandals of modern British times, I think, Liz. The whole Mandelson
I think it's as big as the Profumo.
Oh, it is, yes.
Profumo effect.
It's even bigger, I think, actually, than the Profumo scandal of the 1960s, actually. Because this involves directly, of course, the Prime Minister appointing Mandelson. And this is a can of worms. I think once you open it up, it's going to be hugely unpleasant in terms of what comes out of it.
The latest is that all of the emails, all of the correspondence is going to be released. So we will have something similar to what's been happening with the Epstein files that have been released in the United States. What are people now saying about Peter Mandelson in the United States in connection with Epstein?
Well, of course, there's a huge amount of interest, public interest, media interest in the whole Epstein issue here. The whole scandal, and Mandelson's name is, of course, being dragged into it here in the United States with very good reason. I mean, he strikes me as a very important figure in the whole Epstein scandal, and so I think the American public is now hearing a lot more about Peter Mandelson, and of course, Mandelson was a very big figure in the Washington Beltway. There's no doubt about it. But now I think ordinary Americans across the country, outside the political sphere, are hearing the name of Peter Mandelson for the first time, and they don't like what they hear. This also, of course, greatly impacts the image of the British government as well. I mean, it's an image of sleaziness and unpleasantness, and the whole scandal is very damaging, I think, for the UK's brand. In the United States, and this is the damage, of course, that Keir Starmer has inflicted, along with his cronies, basically, and Mandelson is top of that list. But yeah, Mandelson is now becoming, with all the media coverage, he's becoming an increasingly well-known name to the American public.
And it's fundamentally corrupt. I mean, that's what was happening. It was, selling secrets for his personal benefit, overlooking the fact that Epstein was a paedophile. I mean, it's absolutely abhorrent what was going on. And it's not just linked to Keir Starmer. It goes right back to the Blair government, because it was Tony Blair who put his trust in Peter Mandelson. It was Gordon Brown that rehabilitated Peter Mandelson after yet another scandal over various loan issues in the 90s and 2000s. And this group of people, what is known as New Labour, have corrupted the British state. That's how bad it is. When we're talking about why is this Chagos Island, we can't even call it a giveaway, because amazingly Britain is actually paying Mauritius. But this Chagos Island giveaway is happening because Blair changed the laws. He put international law at the pinnacle, even though nobody else was following it, and even though it's illegitimate because it's basically run by China. And then what he did was put his placement in government departments and made it pretty hard for his successors to change them. So you now have civil servants as well who are beholden to this way of thinking. The entire British state has been corrupted.
Yes, I think that's 100% right. It's the damning reality of Britain today, which is why the next government will have to clear this all up, really, and
it's
really,
clearing the Augean stables is what's going to have to happen, and it needs to go deeper than the political level. It's what we were saying about the US administration, that we need to root out the deep state that have actually been pushing for this to go through.
Yes, absolutely. And the Chagos issue is a perfect example of this. And the deep state is very real. It exists, and it's an operation, unfortunately. Even against a backdrop of, a presidency that has fought tooth and nail against it. But it's still there, actively undermining the interests of the United States, and it's very dangerous. And as you said, Liz, the deep state, the blob, has completely taken over the British government, the British establishment, the British elites, and we need to see in the UK fundamental a change brought about by the next government and throwing out all the rot that has set in London. I think that you're actually one of the very few voices, I think, in the UK, Liz, is actually pointing all this out. What needs to be done on an epic scale, because if we don't, Britain will sink into permanent decline, and the Great Britain that we know and love will disappear, actually, because of these elites. Many of whom are actually, of course, unelected, and most of whom, of course, are unelected bureaucrats and so on, who really hate Britain and everything it stands for in Britain's great history, its imperial past, and many of them, of course, also, frankly, hate the United States, especially what the current U.S. presidency represents, actually, and so the Chagos deal fundamentally undermines the United States. It undermines the US-UK special relationship. It's a gift to communist China. And so we can see why all these deep state elements want to push this Chagos deal through.
And Niall, what can listeners to the podcast do in the next few weeks to help the cause and to stop this surrender deal going through?
Yeah, that's a great point, because perhaps we just have a few weeks before Parliament once again debates the deal, and Labour's a huge majority in House of Commons, and so we don't have much time. But I do believe that actually the President could once again shift his public position on this, and he could weigh in and just outright condemn it and sink the deal in the same way that Margaret Thatcher torpedoed the Belgrano and sent it to the bottom of the sea. This can also be done with Chagos. So, a couple of recommendations. I think, firstly, I think that key figures like Nigel Farage, for example, who have the ear of the President, and very few Britons do. I would strongly urge Nigel to come over here to Washington, see the President, even the last minute, the 11th hour, and just say that, for the sake of both of our nations, he's got to do something to stop this. I do think that Nigel Farage's voice is very important and powerful on this. And he's one of the very few figures who can actually speak directly to the President and urge him to do this, and the President will listen. So that's the first recommendation. I think, secondly, the messaging that I'm seeing right now from Reform, saying that they will rip up the Chagos deal, is the right message. Because what this does, it focuses minds in Washington. Because if the UK is not going to pay £35 billion to the Chinese puppet government Mauritius, then the lease, the 99-year lease for Diego Garcia, which is a whole crazy idea anyway, will disappear. I mean, you can't maintain the lease if the UK government's not going to pay the ransom money, and nor should it pay a single penny to Mauritius. And so this message is very good, because what it does is it increases the pressure on Washington. If the next British government in 3 years or so is going to pull the plug on the deal, then Diego Garcia will completely fall into the hands of Mauritius and in the hands of communist China, and the United States will then have to decide whether to give up Diego Garcia or fight a big war in the Indo-Pacific to maintain it. Do they want to fight a war against China at the expense of huge amounts of treasure and American lives, or should they just sink the deal right now, which the President can do, and keep the base in the hands of the United Kingdom? In my view, it's a no-brainer, as the American people would say. And so the message coming from Reform, and I saw this from Richard Tice yesterday on X, and I retweeted it. This is the right message, that the UK is not going to have any collaboration with this horrible surrender deal once Keir Starmer or whoever replaces him in this horrible, awful socialist government is gone. And the Americans will understand then, actually, that there's a great deal at stake here, and the US will have to fight a war to keep Diego Garcia. Do they want to do that? I don't think the United States will want to do that. So that's the second thing. And I think thirdly as well, and an administration official actually told me this yesterday. He said that they're closely following the reaction in the UK to the latest Chagos development. And they're noticing that a lot of friends and allies of President Trump have been, hugely dismayed by what's happened here. And so they're tracking this. And so the more outrage in the United Kingdom about
people need to get on their X accounts.
Absolutely.
What you're saying now.
Absolutely. And also this administration official I spoke to yesterday, quite a high level official I might add, said that anything can still happen, that you can never rule out what the president does at the last minute. And there's still everything to fight for. And the message is very clear. Do not give up hope, because we can still win this at the very last minute. And I know there are a lot of people in the UK who are closely following it, and you can see that on X. Huge numbers of people are following the Chagos developments. They're very worried about what's going to happen. But my message is don't give up hope. Keep the faith. We'll keep on fighting for it here in Washington, but also in the UK. Keep on fighting as well. And the message that the British people are sending is being heard here in the United States as well by the American people and by key figures in the administration. There are many figures in the administration in top positions who hate the Chagos deal. And so the president can still intervene on this. So do not give up. Do not give up hope. And
that's a call to arms. That's a call to arms.
It definitely is. No surrender. And we're going to fight to win. Yeah.
In addition, people have to understand that this religious following of international law has been massively damaging for Britain. We saw that on things like the Northern Ireland Protocol. We've seen it on the Chagos Islands. We're seeing it right across British foreign policy. And we're seeing it on issues like climate change as well. This slavish adherence to these international institutions, which are dying, is utterly ludicrous. And I want to hear from leading politicians that they're going to junk it, that they're not going to prioritise international law. Instead, they're going to prioritise the sovereignty of Parliament and what is good for British people. That is what we need. And that's why Chagos is so important, because it's symbolic also of that bigger battle that we're going to have in Britain. Niall, thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
It's been great to have you, and keep going on the fight.
I definitely will do, Liz, and a great pleasure to be on the show. And I know you've got a fantastic audience, and a huge audience out there, and it's one of the very best political podcasts out there, I think, Liz. So many thanks for having me on the show today.
Britain's slavish adherence to international law is only benefiting our adversaries, and it's sullying our country down the river. Keir Starmer needs to urgently reverse the decision, but also change the British law so we're no longer subject to these diktats from courts that are controlled by our enemies. I fear, though, this won't happen. He's in an even weaker position than he was before. And ultimately, I believe that it's only President Trump who can stop this deal, which is so damaging, not just to Britain's security, but the security of America and the West.